Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast. I'm Robert Bryce. On this podcast, we talk about energy, power, innovation, and politics. And I'm pleased to welcome my guest today, Heather Stancil. She is a supervisor, a board supervisor in Madison County, Iowa. Heather, welcome to the Power Hungry Podcast.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
So I warned you that I have guests introduce themselves. So if you don't mind, imagine you've arrived somewhere and you don't know anyone and you have, say, a minute or so to introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Heather Stancil. I am a county supervisor here in Madison County, Iowa. Some states call the same position commissioners. So I know not every state calls it supervisors, but it's basically we oversee the running of the county basically in the state of Iowa.
Gotcha. And I'm talking to you today because obviously this is an issue that the Madison County has been fighting now. Wind turbine developer, MidAmerican Energy, now for some time. And 13 months ago or so, I had your colleague Diane Fitch on the podcast to talk about what is going on in Madison County. Give me the update on what has happened between Madison County and MidAmerican Energy over the ordinance that was passed in late 2020 by you and Ms. Fitch, and I guess it was a 2-1 vote placed a new ordinance in effect. What was that ordinance, and then what was MidAmerican's response, and where are we now?
Basically, what we did is we put in we did two things. We put in a protective ordinance that focused on, that took the advice of our Board of Health, and we put in setbacks and noise restrictions and other kinds of restrictions, both for sound and infrasound, the latter of which is the most damaging to folks. And we just did that December 2020. I was elected in November, and because it was a vacant seat, I took office fairly quickly. So we immediately passed that ordinance in 2020, and we also passed an ordinance, a resolution to repeal the special tax break that MidAmerican and all utilities get here in Iowa to encourage, that was specifically allowed by the legislature in order to encourage wind turbine development. So we repealed both of those. And then in January of 2021, a lawsuit was filed saying that that it prevents them from putting in more wind turbine development, which was kind of the idea. That was what I ran on.
So just to clarify, if I may, so MidAmerican sued the county in
Correct.
January of 2021. Immediately the month after the ordinance was agreed upon or was voted on. But you were elected to the Board of Supervisors, a 3-person board, in November of 2020 on an anti-wind platform. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And what was the margin of your vote?
I won by 65% of the vote.
65 to 35 in a county-wide vote?
Countywide, that is correct.
So you just want to repeat, make sure I'm clear on this. So you ran on an anti-wind platform and you won 65-35 is a landslide. Correct.
Yes. And that, which means it was a bipartisan support. So I had quite a few Democrats vote for me. I know there's some Democrats that just couldn't bring themselves to vote Republican, and that's okay. That's okay.
So you identify as a Republican in terms of your own politics. You would consider yourself a Republican.
I am a Republican, but believe it or not, the turbine issue the opposition to turbines is bipartisan. In fact, my Democrat opponent that was running against me was also running on an anti-turbine platform.
No kidding.
Yep.
So I know I interrupted you about the legal issues, but so why do you think you won, and why did you win by such a large margin?
Well, I think I won because our county leans Republican, first of all. Uh-huh. I shared a ballot with President Donald Trump, so I think that helped significantly. But really, our county is a very conservative county, generally speaking, even on the Democrat side. And we really care for each other here. You know, we believe in being good neighbors, and Iowa nice is what we're famous for.
Right.
And people don't like hurting their neighbors. And once folks found out that what this could do to you, property values or whatever, it kind of offset any kind of profit that the farmers or whoever signed these easements originally. I would say nearly almost half of those that signed easements requested to get out, and they were denied.
Well, that's interesting. I've heard this before, and I know I've spoken to one of the county landowners, Mary Jobst, about this very thing, that she had signed an agreement to have turbines on her property and was asked MidAmerican Energy to be released from the contract, and they refused.
Correct. Yeah, the only one that was as far as I know, the only one that was released from his easement was a Supervisor Clifton.
Okay, so I interrupted you. I wanted to make sure, and just so the people who are listening understand what's going on and how long it's been going on, because there's been a lot of pressure on the rural counties and communities by big wind to acquiesce to more turbines. But so I interrupted you. The ordinance was passed in December 2020. MidAmerican Energy, which by the way is a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, which is controlled by Warren Buffett, they sued you in January of 2021. They sued the county supervisors, and I have a copy of the settlement agreement here that was agreed to just a few weeks ago. But bring me up to date then on why MidAmerican sued and then where we are now.
They believe that because the ordinance, they would not be able to put in any more turbines in our county, and a variance was granted to them in 2018 to build turbines. They never built them. And it took 3 elections to get supervisors on the board that listened to the people, basically. At least we thought. We had a majority then, and we passed the ordinance. So they believe that under that ordinance, they couldn't comply to the ordinance, especially since we put a cap on the turbines. Basically capping to what we have existing.
A cap on the number of turbines.
Correct.
And also, and it had a 1.5 mile setback, right, from non-participating landowners?
Yes, that's correct. That was the recommendation of our Board of Health, who reviewed lots of materials, and they have good expertise, and that was why we chose 1.5, is because that was the recommendation of the Madison County Board of Health.
And as I recall, and I've also talked to Dr. Ben Johnson, who's a cardiologist, electrocardiologist. I understand he was one of the leaders in that effort to study the health effects, and that was one of the reasons why the Board of Health agreed or put forward that recommendation. And then the Board of Supervisors acted on the recommendation of the Board of Health to put in the setbacks.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Those particular setbacks, yes.
Right. Thank you. So then what happened where are we on the litigation?
Well,
where's the county on the litigation?
Well, they approved the settlement on the 8th of February. So we had a hearing. Part of the settlement was that we would repeal the health and safety ordinance. So we had a public hearing required under Iowa code to do that. We had a public hearing the week before to where the people could come and speak on whether or not they like the settlement or they like the ordinance, and they gave feedback. It was basically 5-1. In opposition. The people wanted us to continue to fight. They did not want us to accept the settlement. They did not want to repeal the health and welfare and safety ordinance. And unfortunately, the supervisors agreed to the settlement. The other 2 supervisors agreed to the settlement and voted as such.
So, but the key here, as I understand it, and I've been in touch with Diane Fitch. I emailed her several questions. She did text me back a few days ago, rather, giving me her point of view. But the key here, if I understand it, is that in December of 2020, you and Heather and Diane Fitch were the majority on putting in the new ordinance, but then Fitch then switched sides and decided to settle because of the lawsuit that MidAmerican filed, because, as she said, that she felt that the county would lose millions of dollars. And is that a fair summary? Yeah,
that's what she believed. Yes, I don't believe that.
Well, so what is the crux of the issue here? I mean, is it MidAmerican wants to put more turbines in Madison County, and they use the lawsuit. Tell me if I'm understanding this right. They use the lawsuit to effectively force the county to take more turbines than the county wants.
That is correct. They got the variance to build in 2018. They never did build. And there has been consistent public opposition to this that whole time. We've had petitions, we've had hearings, we've had forums. Diane ran on an anti-turbine platform in 2018. And then in 2020, there was a primary. I was in the primary, and I won in a very clear opposition to turbines, and my primary opponent was kind of wishy-washy. I won by 65% of the vote in the primary. And then I went on to the general, and then I won by 65% then. So theoretically, there's 3 elections where the people had a chance to speak on what they wanted, and they were very clear on what they wanted. Even at the most recent forums regarding the settlement, the people wanted us to fight. They said, these are our homes, these are our children, this is our health. Once these things are up, they're not coming down. So, and they're also worried not only about that, but property values. We're a small rural community. I live in Earlham, and they're going to be within 2 miles of Earlham is the closest ones. I think the closest one is 1.9 miles.
From your home in Earlham.
From home, yes. And I live in the town of Earlham. Now, Earlham's only 1,400 people, so we're 1 square mile. So a lot of people, that's, not a very, very small town.
Sure.
But it affects, they're within 1,500 feet of a lot of the homes out in the rural areas just outside of our county. I can go a block and I'm at cornfields. So we are a very agricultural area. We still have a small, we have a K through 12 school. And my concern is that this will stagnate the growth of our town, and our school is dependent on enrollment. And that could kill our school or consolidate our school, which I don't want either. People move here because they want the small town lifestyle. Kids can walk to school.
Sure. So
it's not just my home. I was fighting for my entire township, and the fear that once they come in, they'll keep coming in. A lot of people don't realize that it's not just the turbines, it's everything that comes after the turbines. So you're talking about transmission lines. They can take land by eminent domain. And once these things go up, you're going to need more lines to push that power out and bring it to wherever you want to bring it. And transmission lines can go up with no easement, requirement. They can basically no permission. They can take the land and tell you what it's worth. So it's not just affecting the people of the turbines. I'm afraid for everything that comes after, because the eminent domain, I don't want any of my neighbors' lands taken for transmission lines to go up.
So I told you I'd been in touch with Diane Fitch, and she made it clear, and I can read part of the text that she sent me if you like, but she made it clear that she hated the turbines. She said she thought the people, I'm quoting from memory here, but she called them the promoters liars. I mean, she seems fairly mad. I asked her to explain her position, but she didn't. I mean, why would she change her mind? Because when I had her on the podcast 13 months ago, she was very adamant about her opposition. I'm asking you to speculate here, but why? Why did she change her vote? And what does this say? I guess, why did she change her vote? And what does it say about MidAmerican that they would effectively pressure just one individual into changing their vote on something like this?
I think it's because when she realized the settlement did not include her area of the county, she protected her home and not ours. What a lot of people don't realize is that when this fight was going on, Inver Energy was looking to put turbines up on her side of the county with the idea that MidAmerican would, because this happens a lot. There's a development company that builds the farms, and then they sell it to a utility.
Right.
It's not uncommon.
Energy does this. Apex Clean Energy. They will do all the development work, contract for the construction, and then flip the project to someone else.
Correct. So they were investigating to put turbines up on her side of the county. Well, by then the word was out as what's going on outside of Earlham, my side of the county. And so they did not have as good a response in people signing easements. So eventually they pulled out of that side of the county. Now, you can be a conspiracy theorist and think that it was intentional to help sway a vote. I don't know. But all I know, as soon as she realized that the 30 turbines would, and the settlement would all be around Earlham, our side of the county, and her side she believed to be safe, which I think is foolish. she settled. She agreed to the settlement.
Well, so let me read this to you because I emailed her last month, and then on February 4th, she sent me this. She said, "I'd like to clarify one thing." She says, "Arbor Hills was approved before I was a supervisor. I've held them off for 3 years, but she said, we were clearly told it was illegal and we would lose in a court of law, which we already have lost a lawsuit. I have four very, very she said, I have four people who are, these people are now beating the snot out of me, but being a very, very seasoned retirement government worker, I know when I can't win. I was elected for the people, by the people, and that means all of them. The rest of the county does not want to go into a lawsuit. We've done this before in this county, actually twice, and lost our shirts. I'm not sure you're hearing all sides. Do I like this? I hate it. I hate turbines. I think they're terrible, but I have to protect all of the county."
Well, that's not entirely true. I think the lawsuit she's talking about is something that happened 20 years ago. It had to do with dumping, and that was a clear statute issue. And I don't know what she's talking about with the other one, but this has to do with the health, safety, and welfare of people. And that is the responsibility of government to do it. In fact, it's one of our constitutional responsibilities, is to make sure that we protect the people from things that hurt them. I mean, we have the police, we have the fire, we have emergency medical services, and government has won plenty of lawsuits where we put new laws into place that protect people once we understand things that are damaging. A good example of that is big tobacco.
Right.
That is another well-funded or at the time was very well-funded and backed by government. And, that was until it wasn't. And it was, and government came in and then started regulating it once government realized it's not safe. So that's our role. And what she forgets is it's not our job to tell the people what's best for them. The people spoke very clearly on what they wanted us to do, and that was to fight and keep fighting to keep these things out of our county. And she could believe all she wants that we would lose. I didn't believe that, because I believe the essential role of government is to make sure that we don't bring things into our county or harm our people knowingly. And we are knowingly doing this basically for money. It's all about the money. Whether it's money for the leaseholders or it's money to make sure we don't lose a lawsuit, it's still money. And I believe people are worth more than money.
So you mentioned tobacco. This is interesting. I know you saw this article that was published in a piece that was done by Julia Simon, who's a reporter for National Public Radio, that was aired on February 15th. It was headlined, if I remember, "In Misinformation Wars, Renewable Energy is Latest to be Attacked." You looked at that article. What did you think of that?
It's just, big government and big business united, just like they did with big tobacco. I'm not surprised. There is a huge push for renewables at all costs. And I think there is a lot of money, I should say taxpayer money, to be made in it. And everyone wants a piece. But why would National Public Radio is famously liberal media outlet. Why would they publish that? I mean, what does it say? Why are they supporting big business?
Yes.
Because this particular big business caters to their desire for green energy.
It's that simple in your view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I'm sure there's money behind it, because there's money behind everything. I mean, you look at political reports, financial reports that politicians have to file, you can see they receive hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the level of government, from renewable energy companies, utility companies, environmental groups. And, it's all about the money. And I think with NPR, they are, like you said, they are liberal and they are very much pro-renewable. And they're willing, as long as their desire for a 100%, carbon-free world is realized, they don't care who's trampled on to get there. And what they forget is human beings are part of the environment too. So, as are the animals that are killed by turbines. And we have, in our county alone, we have, birds of prey, we have bald eagles here, we have bat population, and that is tossed to the wayside in the name of renewables, which I think is wrong.
So what do you say to the people, and I've heard this argument myself from people, that renewable energy promoters, oh, well, those birds, climate change is the biggest threat, so don't worry about the turbines. What do you say to that?
The climate has been changing for a millennium. I mean, Iowa was part of the drift of during the Ice Age. I mean, our soil is good because of that. Well, it was cold here once. It's not now. Well, today it's cold, but it was very cold, much colder than it was now. And climate changes. It has been forever. I always marvel at the arrogance of men and women to say they can control the climate more than Mother Nature. I mean, all you need to do is look at a piece of cement and grass growing through it, and you'll realize man is not the power here. Eventually, things are going to pass away, and nature is going to take over. So I always chuckle at the arrogance that we actually think we can fix the climate. Now, does that mean we shouldn't be good stewards? No, we should absolutely be good stewards. And there are people that are irresponsible in taking care of the planet, and that needs to be addressed. But do we need to destroy people in the process? No, we don't. But I think this just right now it's just there's a lot of money behind this, a lot of taxpayer money behind this, and it shifts priorities. I really believe there are a better way to do things, and we're not discovering it because right now this is where the money's at.
And so it's interesting, just the way you talk about your husband is a pastor, so you're churchgoers and Christians, and so there's a I mean, the way you spoke about it that was touching and heartfelt, but it seems to me there's on the other side, it's not just about money. There's almost a religious affiliation to just the idea of renewable energy itself, right? So, right. I mean, I want to touch back on this NPR thing because, frankly, I was just flat offended myself by that article. And it's partly because I spent an hour on the phone with Julia Simon, or rather on a Zoom call. She didn't use any of the information I gave her and instead wrote. But what did you think of that idea that, the opponents of renewable energy are using misinformation? What do you think about that?
Well, I laughed and because if you don't laugh, you cry. Because you're just demonizing a whole side. You're just brushing them aside as if whatever they say is wrong because they don't agree with you, rather than actually dealing with the facts. I'm an engineer by trade, and data
really? What kind of engineer are you?
I was a telecom engineer and analyst. My previous job was that. Oh, okay. So data and numbers, that's my thing. So I like data. I look at data and I look at peer-reviewed reports and stuff like that. I dig into information because I don't take things at face value. Mm-hmm. Because when you're in my industry, you can't, because a network could go down if you have bad data.
Right.
So by tossing things aside like this, where we could have data, there's plenty of data. I mean, we've had wind energy for 20 years now. There's plenty of data out there, and it's just being ignored. And Europe has had this longer than we have had. And they're starting to move away from wind because they're finding there's negative effects. I mean, in Scotland, I think it was Scotland or Ireland, where they actually raised a 1,000-year-old forest to put up turbines. That's just bizarre to me when you're an environmentalist. So, I mean, trees and crops and land, all those things consume CO2, which is what we're trying to reduce, right? So it makes no sense. So I like data, and when people just just basically brush everybody aside saying it's just misinformation, but don't provide any data, then I'm skeptical. I'm like, well, you're just believing, like you said, in a religion, and that's the religion of green energy. So, people as a Christian, people challenge my beliefs all the time, and I have to have a basically a response. We're required to debate and as the Lord says, reason together. We are encouraged by our Savior to reason and intellectually challenge. We're not to be dummies here. So I always find it funny when the same thing doesn't happen in green energy. The data is hidden, or the data is changed, or it's not looked at, or it's just you brushed aside, or probably the most offensive thing is, oh, you're really not feeling the problems you're having with wind energy isn't health related. It's just it's emotional or mental. It's an annoyance. It's a psychological thing, which is absolutely insulting. Because I can tell you right now, there's a lady right now that lives on the west side of the county, is right on the border of the county next to us, which has 535 turbines in their county. And she is suffering regularly from migraines. And she says, I didn't start this problem until these things went up. And she has to sleep in her basement, or she has to leave when the days are bad. So there is plenty of data out there if people would look for it, but it's not as dramatic as, say, cancer, lung cancer with big tobacco. But even then, they hid the data for a very long time. So
you're saying the wind industry is hiding the facts about annoyance, sleep deprivation, the health related issues with the noise from wind turbines. Is that your feeling?
They are definitely not advertising it. For instance, I mean, the data, I believe the data is there, and there is enough anecdotal evidence that should require more research. But they say they're safe, but there's no data that they're safe. Whenever I look at their data that they promote, saying here's proof that they're safe, it's all anecdotal. It's old. I mean, they still quote a 2013 study as proof that there's no damage. I mean, well,
but there are numerous other studies, including 2009 Minnesota Board of Health, Department of Health. I mean, I'm not the one, you're not interviewing me, but in the Not in Our Backyard report that I wrote and published last year in April, over a dozen reports that have been found this annoyance, sleep deprivation. And the part that I found particularly offensive in Julia Simon's NPR report was, it doesn't hurt property values. And she cited one study. Well, okay, point me to the realtor who will sell you a house and say, well, it's a really noisy place. You probably won't be able to sleep here, but it doesn't affect the value of the home. Right. To me, on its face, I thought that was just, just remarkable that she would say that. But
that study she referenced, if it's the one I think it is, I actually looked at the data of that study. Again, I'm a data person, and they included homes that were anywhere from 5 to 10 miles away from a wind farm. Well, that's completely different than living 1,500 feet from a turbine.
Right.
So that is just, it's ridiculous. And as you probably know, data is easily manipulated. You really need a third party that's not paid by renewable energy to actually investigate this. And I haven't had a time to do that, but I would love to talk to realtors or see how properties has moved. When that question came up in one of our forums, it was quickly disputed by our zoning administrator saying, well, I looked at the property values, and according to our assessor, our property values haven't changed. Well, they were only looking at land, not homes. And land values really don't change if a turbine is on it. It's the home's value that changes. And having assessor give the value versus an actual realtor who has to sell the property, that's a completely different story. So right now, actually, people in my county are going out and buying appraisals. They're purchasing appraisals so they can see the property value now versus what it will be when and if these turbines go up.
Let me read you something, because the MidAmerican Energy is, as I said, it's a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, so they're pretty responsive when I've emailed them in the past, and I'm glad to have that. And I emailed them, the press office at MidAmerican, about the litigation. And this is their reply here. I'm going to just read you a couple of paragraphs because I want to make sure that you understand where they're coming from. The reply says, MidAmerican only brought a lawsuit in the Madison County ordinance matter to protect its legal rights for projects the county had already approved and in which the company had already invested, including an ongoing and operational project. MidAmerican did not attempt to disrupt the county's right to limit new developments, and in the course of the settlement was willing to reduce the number of turbines it could construct out of respect for the county's concerns. Company never aspired, this is the part that I think is interesting, particularly given what Diane Fitch said about losing millions of dollars. The company never aspired to collect damages from the county. Again, our interest was in protecting our legal rights to the projects the county had already approved and the investments we had made. We worked hard during the settlement process with the county's attorneys to reach a result that to avoid damage payments by the county. Any assessments or projections of potential liability or damages provided to the county came from its own attorneys. And then finally, the settlement agreement, which you can view here, was negotiated with the county's legal counsel over the course of months and does not, nor ever did include any special agreements with Supervisor Fitch or any other individual supervisors. All siting considerations are made according to the usual criteria for siting wind projects. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that?
Well, that's interesting that they would say that, obviously. The problem here is that they were granted a variance in
from existing ordinances, existing rules.
Right, from existing height ordinances.
Uh-huh.
They never built. Now, granted, they were promptly a private citizen group filed a lawsuit against them against the county because we believed that the Board of Adjustment who granted the variance did so erroneously. So.
You were a party to that lawsuit?
I was not a party to that. No, I agreed with it because I read the way I read the ordinance. I'm like, yeah, they violated it. I was not a party to that. No, I want to make that clear because at the time I was not involved with the group. I hadn't even decided whether or not I was going to run yet. But in 2018, they had filed a lawsuit against our Board of Adjustment, and when I found out about that, I read their concerns, I read the ordinances. I'm like, yeah, they violated it. It's clear to me. So, but eventually they lost their lawsuit. The court sided with the county in that case. However, through this whole process, MidAmerican never built. There was no injunction. They never built. So now comes fast forward to 2020. We pass our ordinance, and then after that, they said, "Okay, let's sue them." So,
so was it just? As I read this and I read the way that they're discussing it, and they've agreed in the settlement agreement, which I also pulled up. They agreed that the turbines wouldn't be more than 494 feet high. Well, all the turbines today are getting a lot taller, right? Yes. So, was this just a power move to make sure there wasn't some kind of legal settlement that would make them comply, or is there a possibility that they won't even build these turbines but just wanted to show the county who's boss? I mean, there seems to me it sounds a little bit to me like that in the language that they're using.
Well, it's hard to say. Obviously it's possible that that's the case because our ordinance was very, very stringent. In fact, it's being used not only by other counties right now considered, but it's being sent all over the country as an example of stringent ordinances and control of turbine development. So that could be that they didn't want a precedent set. They could possibly also not want a precedent set that we could pass an ordinance after a variance is granted. And they claim
right. So they're looking at precedent here so that they don't want other counties to follow what happened in Madison County.
That's possible, yes. The other thing is that gives me pause, as I mentioned earlier. I mentioned to you earlier yesterday. I was up at the Capitol. There is currently a bill in the Iowa legislature to change how the tax assessment is assessed on turbines. So, as I mentioned earlier, we had repealed the special tax assessment with the idea that we wanted to discourage any benefit to come to our county, and if they do come to our county, then they're going to pay for it. So we repealed the tax break they were getting, so they would pay now full property tax. Well, there is a bill right now in the legislature that would completely undo that and make it to where they would pay what's called a replacement utility tax. They would be treated as a utility, even though wind energy is not currently regulated as a utility, which would be either less than what the county would get in taxes from the tax break thing that we repealed, or the same. And I think it's interesting that that legislation was filed the day after our settlement was approved by the supervisors. So I think there's things going on behind the scenes to basically make counties choose between the lesser of two evils. Either give us a tax break A, or we're going to pay less taxes to you with B.
So it sounds, I mean, from the way that you're describing it, here's another power move by the wind industry to Bigfoot counties.
Yeah. So
am I being too cynical here, or is this realistic?
I don't think so, because as of 2 days ago, the only local utility, the only Iowa utility, I should say, that was registered in favor of this bill was MidAmerican Energy.
Aha. So if I can interrupt, just a quick station break. So my guest is Heather Stancil. She's a county supervisor in Madison County, Iowa. She was elected to the Board of Supervisors in Madison County in 2020 and promptly voted in favor of an ordinance that would effectively ban wind turbines in the county. I asked Heather for a call to action where she would want people to go, or to where they should look, and she recommended Resident Rights Coalition for Madison County, which you can find on Facebook. You're not part of that coalition, but that was the group that is in Madison County that has been fighting wind turbines now for how many years? 5 years? 6 years?
Well, I think 5 or 6 years, yeah.
And if you believe NPR, they're all just misguided and don't really understand what's going on.
They're all misguided ding-dongs, yeah.
Bunch of rural rubes, hayseeds who just fell off the turnip truck and have no idea about property values or health issues, and they just don't understand things as well as those city people. What they don't understand
is we have a lot of these people are very well educated. Some make 6 figures, and people kind of. It always amazes me how the derisiveness and condescension they have for farmers. We saw it in the election with, we see it treatment our own Senator Grassley. He's basically a dumb farmer. The man's not dumb, and farmers aren't dumb, and that always amazes me that they think that just because you go to work in a pair of overalls that somehow makes you dumb. And we're not dumb, and we love our land. Farmers are probably one of the best group when it comes to land management and land preservation than any other, I think, because that's our livelihood. That's their livelihood. We have to make sure the land is in good condition and taken care of. And there is a cycle of life here that are interdependent. So birds, bats, bugs, all that is independent, and making sure our land produces what it needs to produce, because Iowa has probably, if not, but definitely the richest land in the world. We feed the world here. So it is our livelihood, and that is another thing why I don't understand wind farms, solar farms, now this carbon capture pipeline. It's all coming over prime agricultural land that, our dirt is the best in the world. So, I mean, it just seems so. I don't understand it. It's confusing to me. Why they would do that?
Well, you mentioned that the solar as well, because I've written a couple of pieces, or published a couple of pieces in Forbes about the backlash against big solar in Iowa, which seems like that. I've spoken with Julie Kuntz, have written about her, Jess Peterson. And it's interesting, too, that what I found now in reporting on this now for many years is that the leaders of the opposition to large renewable projects, wind in particular, but now increasingly big solar, it's not all, but I would say a majority, maybe even 60 or 80% women who are not getting any money from fossil fuel interests. They're not, as far as I can tell.
Nope.
And they're working on these issues from their kitchen table and doing grassroots organizing. Is that how you see it as well? Is that what you've seen in Madison County? Is it women who are leading the fight against these projects?
I would say it's mostly women, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because we are I don't want to sound sexist here,
Go ahead. You can. It's
misogynistic,
you.
but
This is okay. We're narrowcasting here. There's no.
I just think we're closer to the whole circle of life, and a lot of the men are out working, but I think the farmers are out working the fields, and the farmers' wives are the ones defending them. So I think that's probably the best description. And even though I'm not a farmer, but I can tell you, I'm definitely not making any money of this. I took a huge pay cut to run for office and be elected. So
why did you do it?
Because when you have to choose between your job and your home, you choose your home. I chose my home. I want to defend my home, and that's what this is about. My neighbors, the land, the agriculture, my home. I could always get a second job, and I have, to help pay the bills. But this is a fight. A job is temporary. I mean, these things are going to be up forever, and it was worth it to me to take the fight to the end. And that's what I wanted, and that's what the people of our county wanted, which is why we are so heartsick that the standard bearer in our county is the one that betrayed us. So it's disappointing, truly.
So the setback ordinance, then the setbacks that the Board of Health recommended, those are gone now?
Yes.
All of that repealed, the 1.5 mile setback.
All of it's repealed. All of it, every single bit. The noise, the setbacks, the protection for our covered bridges, everything gone. In fact, it's the one that it was repealed and replaced with something even worse. So they now have higher noise protections. They are allowed to make noise higher decibel levels. If the ambient noise goes up, then they are allowed to have their turbines be louder. So yeah, we had very significant protections on everything. Wildlife, migratory patterns, wildlife migratory patterns. We had protection setbacks for our bridges, for any kind of historical areas, agricultural preservation areas. We had all that, and all that's gone.
Who wrote the ordinance?
A group of us did. So even though the ordinance is called the Stancil ordinance, the only reason it was called the Stancil ordinance is because to tell the difference between the previous versions of ordinances. So Diane had one, but as time goes on, we found different issues that popped up.
Right.
So
but that was the ordinance. But the Stancil ordinance was the one that was put in place in December 2020. What is the
correct?
But the new ordinance, it was the one I was asking about. Who wrote the language in the one that then now is going to take precedent over the old one?
Our county attorney wrote that, and he used what was supposedly approved as part of the variance permit in 2018. And I disagreed with that because the variance permit only was for the height. It was not. There was no specific approval on any recommendations from the zoning administrator. So basically what they put in place was what MidAmerican Energy applied for back in 2018.
But they changed the noise part of it. That must have come from MidAmerican.
The noise actually came from our zoning administrator, who copied it from another county's ordinance, who was written by MidAmerican Energy. So and he told he believed that was the standard. This is the standard for ordinances for wind. I'm like, no, it's not. There's no standard out there. And I know this. There's no standard out there other than what that was been written by MidAmerican or any other utility company.
So I responded. I felt deeply what you said about protecting your home, but I also detect, if I'm mistaken, and I know you're a Christian and a strong Christian, it's by all appearances, I detect some real anger here.
Yeah, I'm angry. I mean, who wouldn't be angry when you're betrayed? both my Democrat opponent and I ran an election with integrity. We did not stoop to the dirty pool that you often see in elections nowadays, because we're neighbors, because we live in Madison County. And even though, as she's a Democrat, I'm a Republican, even though we disagree on a lot of things, we can still come together as neighbors. The partisan politics is not felt as deeply in local government as it is maybe in state or federal. And that's how that's how we treat each other. And that's why I think is so deeply hurtful as to what happened. We felt we were betrayed by our zoning administrator, by our Board of Adjustment, because, all this data that we have now was talked about back in 2018. And in fact, one Board of Adjustment member has now said that had he really known and understood what this was about, he would never voted in favor of the height ordinance or height variance. And that would have swung the whole decision, and we never wouldn't even be here. So it boils down to the fact is we have people in office, whether elected or not, that are not listening to their constituents. They're listening to big money and big wind and big government and wherever they can get it. And the whole point of government, I'll go back to this, is to do what our constituents and our residents want. That's our purpose here. What do they want? We're not here to do what we want. We're here to do what they want. And they didn't want these things. And they've been consistent the whole way. So, it has not changed. It has not gone down, and it still hasn't gone down. I mean, the feelings are still here. So, yes, I'm angry. Wouldn't you be angry?
I would be outraged, I think. Well,
yeah.
I'm a long way away. I'm outraged. I'm outraged by how this has happened. And in a county, as following this now for a couple of years and seeing what's happened, and to see how the media has covered it, and how disgraceful the media coverage has been, how the big media outlets have ignored it and continue to ignore it, and invariably side with big business against small town America. I mean, I speak to a lot of rural co-ops. I know I've talked to farmers. I love talking to people who work on the land and work with their hands, and it's just deeply distressing. But I didn't contact you to give you my homily. But let me go and I told you I talked to MidAmerican Energy or emailed with them, and they said that I asked about the tax credits, and this is the part that to me is germane to what we're talking about in terms of big business. As you, I'm sure, recall, Warren Buffett from Omaha, head of Berkshire Hathaway, said in 2014, the only reason to build wind turbines is to get the tax credits. Mm-hmm. So I emailed MidAmerican Energy about the tax credits that they might get in Madison County. And Jeff Greenwood replied and told me that the company plans to spend, I'm quoting here, $3.9 billion in Iowa on a new project called Iowa Prime, and net zero, their goal for net zero on 2,042 megawatts of new wind, and that they will get $1.8 billion in tax credits. Mm-hmm. So my algebra has been terrible since high school, but what it looks like to me is that works out to about $881,000 per megawatt. So you assume 30 turbines that MidAmerican will add now due to this settlement agreement, 30 turbines, 3 megawatts, that's 90 megawatts. That works out to about $79 million in tax credits the company will get for, in effect, forcing more turbines on Madison County. Does that
in addition to a property tax break?
And what will that amount to?
Well, we repealed the property tax break that we were allowed, that Iowa code allowed us to put in back when our Maxburg turbines were built. We repealed that in an effort to discourage MidAmerican and companies like them from coming into our county. And if they choose they come in our county, then they're going to pay for it. We repealed that in that hope that would do that. Well, now that hope is being undermined by this new legislation that's up in our Iowa legislature right now, which was in play apparently last year is when they started discussing it. So,
I'm just curious, is that legislation being carried by an urban legislator or a rural legislator?
Urban.
So is this the other part of it, I guess, in terms of, I think about this in the big picture, this is just part of the, yet another example of the urban-rural divide, where And I'm going to turn back to NPR because, as I told you, that piece just left me just absolutely spitting mad. Well, here's an urban reporter from San Francisco talking about, those rubes out there in the country. But it seems part of a bigger split in America that I think is getting worse, which is the urban rural divide, the people who produce the food, the fuel, the fiber, and the people who live in the cities who want all those things, but they don't want to deal with any of the effects or any of the infrastructure that is required to make that happen.
Right.
Does that rhyme? Does that rhyme with what you? I mean, you live in a town of 1,400. I'm in Austin. It's a town of 1 million, right? I mean,
yeah.
we're light years away in terms of what, where the places we live. But does that rhyme with you about the urban rural divide? About this?
I have a unique perspective is that I haven't always been a small town girl. I moved here 16 years ago from Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
And previous to that, I lived outside of Chicago. So Earlham is the size of Earlham for my town is about the same size as one of the subdivisions I lived in Phoenix. So
right.
It was quite a change. However, it was a beautiful change. I would never go back to living in a city again. In fact, to me, Des Moines is too big, and they're 500,000 people.
Right.
But yeah, there is definitely a feeling of where we're not appreciated. We're seen as serfs. We're seen as people to serve them. And I don't want that. I don't, but it's very frustrating because the people that seem to condescend to us, and even in Iowa, the ones that support wind energy, that support solar, are either the ones that are getting paid to do so, or the ones that will never suffer the effects. And it's sad to see that's happening even in Iowa. But if you had to live under these things, you wouldn't like them either. And that's why you don't see turbines in cities. I mean, there is technology out there right now where I've seen it out there to where there's turbines that are small little turbines that can be mounted on city buildings or high rises and power the building. I mean, it's all experimental, but it's not being explored or taken seriously because, we can just put these things up in the country for pretty quickly and get paid to do so by the feds. I guess that's probably the most infuriating thing is that these things are being forced upon us with our own money. And in fact, people in my county have said, even if we lost the lawsuit and we had to pay damages, they would willingly pay an extra $100 a year on their taxes for 30 years to make sure they didn't come here.
Pay to keep them away.
Mm-hmm.
So will there be
That's how much we don't want them.
So will there be any movies made called The Wind Turbines of Madison County?
Well, I don't know about that. Madison County is unique in that we are so well known, not only in America, but all over the world because of our bridges. We are also the birthplace of John Wayne. So maybe that's why you kind of see a little bit of True Grit here. And so we're very well known. And that's what I guess is disappointing too, is we had an opportunity to not even defend our county, but kind of lead the way in defending other places that don't want these things because we're so well known. People know us. And I'm just very frustrated is that, there are counties in Iowa right now that don't have the residence density we have that want these things. Why don't we going there? Why do we want to put turbines within 1,500 feet of someone's homes? I mean, the turbines we have now in Maxburg on the southwest corner of our county, it's not very population dense. It's very rural. And Earlham is the second biggest town in our county. And they want to put these outside our town. Why? The only thing I can think of is it's cheaper to run fiber. It's cheaper to use SCADA systems. They can connect to an existing substation. It's closer. It's cheaper.
And the people just happen to be in the way.
Yeah.
Is it that simple?
I think so. And it definitely, I don't like to badmouth MidAmerican Energy, and I won't. I think this is a blind spot for them because I do know a lot of people there that work there, good people, good, honest, hardworking people. when we've had tornadoes in the state, and we've had derecho that went through the state, and they stepped up and helped. There's good people in that company, and I will give them kudos for that. But money changes people sometimes, and I think that's what we're seeing here. It's a blind spot, and it's hard to resist. And I can probably fairly say that had the landowners that signed the easements in our county not been given money, they would never have signed the easement. It's as simple as that. And that goes to what Mr. Buffett said. Had they been not getting the money, they wouldn't be putting these up. So has it split the county? I mean, it sounds to me, and this is something I've heard over and over again, particularly absentee landowners signing deals that resident landowners would never do. Yeah. And you talked about the feeling of betrayal. Does wind energy unite rural communities, or does it split them? Splits them. In fact, I have to run for re-election this year because of we have moved to districts. We used to be elected at large. Now we're moving to districts. And I think that's going to divide us even more, because now folks on my side of the county cannot vote out the 2 supervisors that voted for wind. Whereas before we could. And that was championed by a group of people that support wind. The making the districts rather than having at-large votes. Yeah. So the dangerous part is that what I fear is that we're going to have 2 districts gang up on the third. So Winterset District and the Northeast District, where Diane lives, could decide, okay, we're just going to zone Earlham and everywhere else as wind turbines zone and let more in. Because that could happen. We could have a change of supervisors and who support wind and come in, hey, we want the money, and turn our county into our next door county like Adair. Which has 500 turbines. 535, yeah. I don't know. I'm a person that has to predict things that go wrong, because in my line of work, my previous line of work, if things went wrong, then the network goes down. So I just like worst case scenario, and that's potentially that could happen. So I wasn't necessarily opposed to going to districts, because I think it's beneficial, because our county is growing, and we want to make sure that not one area of the county dominates the other. But on the flip side, I can see where, because of this wind turbine fight, I can see where it's been divisive. And that probably saddens me more than anything else. We were united against these turbines, and I think we still are. I still think 60 to 75% of this county does not want them. But now, because we're divided into districts, it's easier to basically stake your claim and stand there. I don't know. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that we still stand strong at turbines, and we put more better ordinances in place when it comes to industrial development, regardless of the type of development, because they're not going to stop at turbines. I mean, we're seeing in our neighboring counties what they're doing with the carbon capture pipeline, and they want to use eminent domain. And that particular company isn't even a utility; it's a private company. And which one is that? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that one. Carbon Capture Solutions. Okay. They are actually the CEO of their parent company is one of the biggest Republican donors out there. And what's that name? I haven't heard about that. Is this carbon capture from the ethanol plants, or is this something okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. So who's the CEO? What was the name of that? I don't know that company. Rastetler is his last name. I can't remember his first name. Okay. But that's a big fight going on right now. They want to take farmers' land, and for basically what is an experiment that is run basically on subsidies. It can't run on its own, and the carbon capture economy, that's what it's dependent on, or the carbon credit economy. Right. Anyway, there was a bill in our legislature to stop the ability for a private company to use eminent domain, and it was mysteriously killed.
But the legislature
So,
did pass a bill in 2017 on eminent domain for high voltage transmission, correct?
I believe so. I think there's exceptions in that bill. This one was that you couldn't use eminent domain for the carbon capture pipeline unless I think there was like a 90%
Oh, okay.
voluntary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and it passed through subcommittee, but it mysteriously killed in committee. And there's speculation as to why. Of course, politics and money.
Sure.
That is not happening in our county, but that is one example of things we need to be proactive about and have ordinances in place to prevent that from happening if should they choose to set their eyes on Madison.
Gotcha. Well, we've been talking for a good while, Heather, and I appreciate your time. Again, my guest is Heather Stancil. She's a county supervisor in Madison County, Iowa. She recommends you that y'all look at Resident Rights Coalition for Madison County on Facebook, which, according to NPR, is spreading misinformation about wind and solar projects in rural America. Just a couple last questions. What are you reading? What when you're on your bedstand or on your desk? What books are you reading these days?
Well, lately, because the legislature is in session, I've been reading a lot of bills.
Okay.
So that probably until April, that's going to probably be the most what I read. Also, too, I'm reading. I'm chairing our comprehensive plan update committee. We have a comprehensive plan we seriously need to update. So there is a committee of folks here in the county that are gathering together to do that. So I'm also reading a lot of ordinances, not only from our state, but other states, to kind of inform and guide. Because I think one of the problems the reason why we had this problem with wind is because our ordinances are very old and they seriously need to be updated to stand with the times. And a lot of other counties are finding that out. So that's pretty much what my life's going to be probably for the next 6 months is legislative bills and ordinances. Very boring.
lucky you. It doesn't sound like Tom Clancy or I don't know what.
No, I don't have a lot of time for the fluff, unfortunately, right now.
Yeah, no problem. So my last question, what gives you hope?
Well, what gives me hope? Well, first of all, I have hope because this country and its people have endured for a long time, and we've overcome obstacles that a lot of people haven't before. I truly believe that the Lord will give us a miracle in our county and protect us from these turbines. I truly believe it, even though it doesn't make any sense. And that's what I'm praying for. I'm praying for that the bridges of Madison County is protected and its people are protected. And that this whole thing that's going on informs us so we can do better, not just as a people in our county, but maybe help the bigger companies do it better. Because the last thing you want is to tick off your customers. But my hope is in the Lord and in the people of where I live and in the country and where I live, because this is only temporary. We're only here for a short period of time, and we try to do as much good as we can. And my charge is to make sure I do as much good as I can for the people who I'm called to serve. So that gives me hope.
Well, we'll stop there. That's great. My guest, Heather Stancil, thank you for coming on the Power Hungry podcast. As I said, you can find more about Heather. She is the county supervisor in Madison County, Iowa. She recommends you look up Resident Rights Coalition for Madison County on Facebook. Heather, thanks again for being on the Power Hungry podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Welcome. And all you in podcast land, tune in for the next episode of the Power Hungry podcast. Until then, see ya.
Bye-bye.